there were concerns with the powers that be, the label heads, and I think even Glenn Ballard, where they're like, "Do we want to launch with this? This is very extreme in a way, and it may not have the reaction we want." And I think, they wanted like ironic, which she didn't even want in the album, or they wanted head over feet. They wanted something a bit softer to
Hmm.
launch with, and she wanted the opposite. She's like, "No, I want to draw people in, get them intrigued, and then they can go back through the album." And I mean, her forethought on it changed the whole course of this album.
What's up, y'all? I'm Kelly Clarkson.
Hey, it's Steve McRae.
Hey, I'm Josh from the band Need to Breathe.
I'm Olivia Lunny.
We are so excited to welcome to the Kelly Alexander Show, Akon. Hi.
What up, Kels?
Hey, I'm Judy Gold.
And I'm hanging out with the Kelly Alexander Show.
This is Jordan, and I'm hanging out on the Kelly Alexander Show.
I'm Rob, and I'm hanging out on the Kelly Alexander Show.
I'm hanging out with the Kelly Alexander Show right now.
Jealous?
I am very excited to welcome to the show music journalist Selena Fragassi, who has a new book out called Alanis, 30 Years of Jagged Little Pill. And before we even start talking about that, I should mention that Selena works for amazing publications like Chicago Sun-Times and also Spin. So Selena, thank you so much for joining us on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I am ridiculously happy that someone decided to celebrate 30 years of Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. And I think we have to start with why you decided to do this. Like, was this a seminal album for you as a kid, and that's why you needed to revisit it?
Yes, absolutely. This album came out at a really interesting time for me. I was 13 when it came out, and I was in Catholic grade school. I was still forming my worldview opinions. And it's funny, I talk about this in the intro, but the first time I ever heard Alanis at all was when my uncle put Jagged Little Pill, the CD, in his car. We were running an errand with my cousin, his daughter. And You Ought to Know came on, and of course that line came on, and I was like, "Oh my God, we can't hear these words." And he said to me, "I know you don't understand this right now, but please remember her and listen in a few years to her because it will make a lot more sense." And sure enough, it did. So this album has always been close to my heart.
Amazing. And so what was the actual decision to delve into this? Because I'm sure a lot of work went into your book to put this together because there's so much and so many people hold her very dear.
Yes, I think, and I super respect that, and I'm one of them. I appreciate the heck out of Alanis Morissette in her era, what she's done for singer-songwriters in our era. So I took that with a very seriously. And so for me, the mission was kind of selfish at first. I wanted to know the story of this album. I wanted to know what made her want to write these things at 20 years old. I wanted to know how this album was made. I wanted to know why it became as big as it did. And so it started from that motivation and it snowballed, and I just uncovered a lot that I never knew and that I hope readers take away appreciating about the album and her as well.
And when you started to work on this book, like, did you reach out to her? Did you reach out to her team? Like, who did you get to speak to from we'll call it Camp Alanis?
Yeah. Yeah, so Alanis was not part of this book. Of course, if artists do books, it's usually one.
Yep.
So she was not part of it, but I interviewed people that were in her circle at that time, which I thought was really important. So I talked to her first manager, her Jagged Little Pill manager, Scott Welch, and I talked to her Jagged era publicist, Mitch Snyder, and they were really invaluable in kind of setting the scene, letting me know how they were branding her, marketing her, issues that came to the surface, the circumstances that made this album. So their voices were great. I also wanted to put in the perspective of three of my really respected colleagues in music journalism who were also women. I feel like back in Alanis's day, in her heyday, a lot of men commented on her and some unfairly. And so I really wanted to have a different side of the coin with women who have, and some have actually spoken to Atlantis. So there's a lot of authenticity in the interviews. And in addition to that, I did a ton of research where I poured through copious amounts of interviews she's done over the past 30 years and to really get her own words, her verbatim quotes, and how she felt about things and her recollection of events as well. So a lot of research went into this for sure.
Now, for us here in Canada, she for us started as like a pop star,
Yeah.
like I mean, she is a pop star in the grand scheme of things, but she really was like a dance pop star.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, like, did you delve into some of her history before you landed on Jagged Little Pill to kind of see just how much of like a 180 in a way she did for
Oh
that
yeah.
album from what she'd done before?
I did. So in America, I don't think many of us really knew about that unless you'd done more of a deep dive into Alanis's history, because our first taste of Alanis was Jagged Little Pill, which I think added to the explosion because it was like, who the heck is this and where did she come from? So I thought it was very important to definitely put that part in, especially knowing that this publisher is, based in the US, a lot of American readers would be reading it to really set the foundation because as you said, it grew from there. What happened to Alanis when she was a kid pop star, she was a teenager, was harrowing. And a lot of those experiences ended up informing Jagged Little Pill as her opinions matured and she became more of an adult. And so I thought it would not make sense to not have her pop star past and be a part of this book. The other thing I found really interesting is that both she and Glenn Ballard, her co-writer and producer on Jagged Little Pill, they both came from the pop world because he had worked with Wilson Phillips and Paula Abdul. He was a protege of Quincy Jones. And I found it fascinating that they veered together in the opposite direction. They came up with this very unpolished, raw, confessional music that was so not like either of their histories. So again, it all kind of made sense in the context of the book.
And when you were, again, doing your deep dive and stuff, when it came to the first single, which is You Ought to Know, and that blew everybody out of the water, I read, and please confirm or deny, that like it wasn't a popular decision for her to launch with that single, but she wanted it.
Yeah, that's 100% true. It was her decision. I think there were concerns with the powers that be, the label heads, and I think even Glenn Ballard, where they're like, "Do we want to launch with this? This is very extreme in a way, and it may not have the reaction we want." And I think, they wanted like ironic, which she didn't even want in the album, or they wanted head over feet. They wanted something a bit softer to
Hmm.
launch with, and she wanted the opposite. She's like, "No, I want to draw people in, get them intrigued, and then they can go back through the album." And I mean, her forethought on it changed the whole course of this album.
Can you talk a little bit about why she didn't want ironic on the album?
Yeah, I think well, it's funny because now we all know it as being a misuse of the word.
Yep.
But she has really changed our perception of what irony is, which is really funny. I think for her, it didn't feel like a strong song. It felt like she was writing very stream of consciousness, but I think for her that was just whimsical and maybe wasn't saying something because for her music in Jagged Little Pill and thereafter was a means of conversation and communication, unlike just pure entertainment, like in her pop world. And so I think if I'm inferring correctly in my research, is that she didn't think it was like as befitting of what she wanted to say to the world as her other songs were like Perfect or Right Through You or You Ought to Know.
Which is your favorite song on the album and why?
So it changed in the writing of this book. It was You Ought to Know for many reasons. Many, many people cite that song because it was so ferocious and interesting. And I talked to Lindsay Parker, a music journalist for this book, and she had such a great thought on it is that it's like those petty thoughts in our head when we're jilted and jaded and that we always want to say to an ex-boyfriend, but we never have the guts to. And she put it on record. I'm like, yeah, you're so right. So I love that song. However, in writing this book and listening to the album like 100 times, it became Right Through You because I think of any songs on the album, that one is the most direct, the most fierce, the most in your face because she's really taking to task all the male record executives who wanted to dismiss her, change her, thought of her as just like a sex pot, didn't take her seriously. And I think that's her bravest song on the album.
Now, can you talk a little bit about the label because, or the record label, I should say. Um, we know that like there it was a struggle, like nobody else was really interested in her, and then Madonna's label, Maverick, took a chance on her at the time. Can you kind of explain how that worked out and why
Yeah.
that worked out?
Yeah, I think, she and Glenn were just dumbfounded that they couldn't get any attention. And Glenn had contacts. I mean, he wasn't like a newbie producer. He went decades deep. He was 2 decades older than her. And so I think they were just kind of dumbfounded because they're like, we think we hit on magic here, and no one would give him a time of day. Atlantic, Interscope, Virgin, they all passed on it. At this point, Alanis was defeated. She was like, let's just self-release it. She really, her hopes were dashed. And a very random impromptu session and invitation came up to go play for Maverick through a connection of her management. They knew Guy Oseary. And it was funny because she wasn't ready for this audition, quote unquote, at all. She was in sweatpants, no makeup. And she's like, what? And Glenn's like, we have to go now. Throw your guitar in the car. Let's go. And it was like because she presented herself that way, I think it was even more raw and they just were blown away. In particular, Guy Oseary was blown away. Yes, it was Madonna who was the head of this label, the face of it, as a fellow woman who really respected Alanis as she got to know her. But Guy Oseary said some curious things of when he heard her, because they're the same age. He said she's like the Joni Mitchell of our generation because there wasn't someone like that yet who
Mm.
had come on for Gen X. And so all these people, like, was it because it was male executives or was it because they were older and they didn't understand her? So here she finally had someone who got it.
Who would you think, or who would you say that Alanis has influenced? Because she's obviously influenced so many artists, but like I feel like not only has she influenced up and coming, and even now established women artists, but I think a
Yeah.
lot of guys were also influenced by just her magic. Like she is magical.
Oh yeah, it's funny because I've done a lot of interviews for the book with men who were on the radio at the time as well, still there at those stations, and we're talking about just the appeal she had and how much they loved her too. So I think, this woman definitely fits in like very feminist themes, but it was really appealing to all, and it really was a snapshot of 20 something life. She really captured it well for anybody. I think, there's a lot to be said of the 90s sort of cafe singer-songwriter style artists who came after her, the Lilith Fair era, not necessarily all because of Alanis, but Alanis made it viable for them to have a place on radio and record labels. Once she brought in 300 million for her record label, they were like dollar signs and they were looking for the next Alanis. So she made it really viable to have more women present in that vein. But fast forward to today, I mean, you can talk about Olivia Rodrigo, you can talk about Taylor Swift, Halsey, Pink. There are so many. Katy Perry actually sought out Glenn Ballard to make her first album because she loved Jagged Little Pill so much. And all of these women have said such lovely things about Alanis, and I do have a lot of those quotes in this book too, but the lineage is really there.
Do you think Alanis, because again, as a good Canadian, I know that there's this innate humbleness that I think most of the country has. I think she falls into that.
Sure.
Do you think she has been able to take in just how much that album means to the world?
Yes, I do. She actually writes an essay, and I need to check if she did one for the 30th, but she has written an essay like every big anniversary of the album talking about that and talking about her gratitude for all the people who really pushed it to the forefront. I think what's interesting, being Canadian, and that would be my perspective too on her, is that she also, like when she moved to America, she was robbed within weeks of moving here. And I think it just made her realize the world is a different place than Canada and America. And I think for her, the impact really affected her more personally. She went on CNN and said she didn't smile for 2 years during Jagged Little Pill. She had PTSD because there was so much attention on her. There was so much pressure for her. There was so much pressure for a follow-up. And she toured for like almost 3 years straight. And she had to take a break and literally go across the world to India to recoup. So I think it really took a big, big toll on her. And she did come to appreciate the impact, but I think at the time it was very hard for her.
Yeah, I don't doubt it because you even see some of the young women now and young guys, like it's not just this is not just a female artist situation, but like I think now, obviously, with the advent of social media, that wasn't there when this came out. But the amount of pressure on young artists, but I think more of them now are willing to say, like, I need a mental health break and then do what they need to do. Like even Justin Bieber coming off tour a couple of years ago, he needed to not be on tour anymore. I think in the 90s, that wasn't an option for all of these artists. And I think that's why you saw a lot of artists that had drug addiction and alcohol problems because that's how they coped as opposed to where we are now. Um, do you think that the like what she went because she went through like a tornado, you know what I mean? Like times a million, which in a way was extremely amazing. But then, yeah, just all that pressure because she was also a solo artist. It's not like she had three people in the band with her, like it was all on her. Um, do you think that for the follow up, like there was just no way she was going to reach the heights of Jagged Little Pill?
Yeah, I think that would have been insane to think she ever could. I mean, that album ended up selling 33 million worldwide, but even at its heyday, it was selling 1 million copies a month. I mean, that just does not happen. So I think her team understood that too. I think the pressure was self-applied. she has always talked about what a people pleaser and perfectionist she is. That's the whole song Perfect. And speaking of mental health, she was one of the people in the 90s who was vocal about opening up about eating disorders and putting this, idea of perfectionism. She put those in songs. Like that wasn't a thing in the 90s. We became more concerned about mental health, I would say, probably like a decade after that. But she was really a vanguard for that. And she's been very open about her struggles and her therapy and things of that nature. Um, but yeah, I think it just would have been impossible to try to live up to that.
Joining us on the show is as music journalist and author Selena Fragassi, who has written a book called Alanis 30 Years of Jagged Little Pill. Before we go further, can you tell people how they can get the book? Because I want to make sure they know how to get their hands on it.
Yeah, it's out now and it's available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, anywhere you buy books. But I do love to give a shout out to mom and pops. A lot of indie retailers carry it or can order it.
Amazing. Now, you mentioned when we first started chatting about female music journalists, like colleagues of yours, who you spoke to. Um, what is their take on Alanis's place with this album and the unfair treatment that she probably got? Because, like, it's funny. Before you answer that question, recently we've all seen what Britney Spears has gone through and coming out the other side and looking back at some of those early 2000 interviews, it's ridiculous what she was put through. I'm assuming Alanis on some level was put through the same thing. So yeah, what are your colleagues saying, female colleagues?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny because actually I talk about one interview in particular in the book, which was with MTV 120 Minutes, very early in the Jagged promo cycle. And she's talking and she's in this very eloquent, deep thought on a subject. And this PA comes over and like interrupts her and tries to move hair out of her face. And he was like, "Oh, I thought you would want that hair removed." She was like, the look she gave him. And she was like, "I don't really care." Like it was so weird. It was all about fashion and looks, unlike what male men were able to give their
Hmm.
pure, unedited thoughts on topics and have the platform to speak about it. But she, yes, was treated very much like a trophy kind of star. I think, I did talk about this with the other female music journalists, and that's why I wanted their voices in this piece is, back in Jagged Little Pill days, she was very unfairly tagged as this quote unquote angry young woman, as if that was a bad thing too in the first place. And there were two competing cover stories in Rolling Stone and Spin in November of that year. And it really just was so narrow-minded, in my opinion, too, because it's like, did you even listen to the album? Because she has a song that's very angry, but there's so many emotions on this album. But yeah, she did, interviews there were a lot of shallow interviews, but I will say her publicist, when they were talking, he and Alanis, about what interviews she wanted to do and how she wanted to be perceived, she put the standard very early that she would do no celebrity interviews. There was going to be no People magazine. There was going to be no Entertainment Weekly. She wanted respectable music publications who could have deep conversations with her. And so I think that's why we never really saw her as much in the like tabloid fodder as we did other stars.
Let's talk a little bit more about Madonna for a moment because, in a way, I don't know how to phrase this. In a way, I am surprised that she had a lot of respect for Alanis. In other ways, I'm not. And I say the first part of it because I don't know if Madonna would have ever been jealous of Alanis in a way because she's also
Yeah.
fierce, but in a different genre of music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's really kind of crass. There's an anecdote where when Alanis was robbed in LA, it was like a few days before meeting Madonna. And Madonna literally said to her, "That's so cool. I want to be robbed." And it was like, so jealousy, sure. Yeah, I think, Madonna had come forth and said that she saw a bit of herself in Alanis. I think she saw that fierce, raw, brutal honesty. They had different packages, of course,
Hmm.
but I think there was very much a similar kind of state of mind in terms of trying to break status quo and be rebellious and not really care what people thought about you. And so I never came across any kind of research of competition or anything. The only thing that was caused a bit of strife was after Jagged took off, they wanted to kind of change her contract later, and there was a point where she wasn't going to sign with them again. And so there were a lot of behind door meetings about that. But other than that, I think there was a healthy respect for Alanis. And I think Madonna was very excited because Maverick was coming into its own. It's like bands at that point were, and no disregard because I love them, but Deftones and Candlebox. But this was a new artist for them and she was huge for them. And so I think there was just a lot of respect.
That's amazing. Which because it's sometimes you never know which way Madonna is going to fall. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting to see who she supports and who she doesn't in a way. And
Sure.
so I'm super happy because I you can also see the side of like, of course she would support Alanis. Like, of course she would be behind her 1,000,000%. And
Yeah.
there's I recently interviewed DJ Tracy Young, who of course very much hooked up with Madonna and won a Grammy with Madonna in 2020. And she's like Madonna's super supportive. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to see like how that goes. So I'm happy to know that that was actually a thing. And I did want to ask you too, like, um, how do you think the album has remained relevant 30 years later?
I think because she talks about such universal themes on this album that really all people, especially young people, struggle with. And then she was so honest about it. And so I think this is going to be always considered one of those classic albums because so many people can glean to something, one song or more on there. And I think, there's this whole kind of subcontext in this book about passed down music, which I keep thinking about so strongly after writing it, of just the idea of what a gift it is as people who are elder pass down music to you. My uncle did it for me. I
Mhm.
done it for my stepdaughter. Certainly people did it for Olivia Rodrigo and Taylor Swift. And so I think there's this element of wanting, especially young women, to maybe hear this album because it was so different and it was so important, the messages that she was putting forth. So I think it's always going to be considered a classic.
What does Taylor Swift think of Alanis Morissette?
Taylor Swift has come out and said that she wouldn't even have her career if it wasn't for Alanis. Alanis broke through the gates, making it feel okay to put your diary out there in the world. And it's kind of funny because, Taylor has all those Easter eggs in her songs and what X is this song about? And obviously that's very much from the Alanis playbook for better, whether it was intentional or not.
Mhm.
Um, but she very much respects her as the godmother of this kind of craft of singer-songwriting.
And when it comes to you, like obviously you said like Alanis is not part of this book. Like I know how much I want to personally interview. Well, Alanis is on my list also, but like
Yeah.
the followers right now who are watching this and listening to this know that I'm a massive Janet Jackson fan, and
Oh,
know
nice.
that I've basically interviewed everyone around her except her. And
Yeah.
so I'm still putting it in the universe that it's going to happen one day.
Yeah.
Uh, do you want this to happen for you? Like is she number one on your bucket list of interviews?
Oh, she's definitely up there. And I know her whole team has copies of this book, so I'm hoping in some way, shape, or form she's read it and appreciates it. And it was done in such a honor and celebration of her in this album. I would love to chat with her. I feel like she comes off like that big sister kind of vibe, and I feel like she would be such a deep conversationalist, and you could really get in the weeds with her about a lot of different topics. So yeah, I would love to at some point.
And did you have a chance to see the Broadway show?
I did twice in Chicago and LA. Yeah.
Amazing. Can you tell us what your thoughts are of it?
Yeah, I thought it was incredible how Diablo Cody was able to take out not only the themes that Alanis was putting forth in the album, which are apparent, but made it into a narrative, like a family, all kind of dealing with different issues that she talks about on her album and modernized it because Alanis really had some rules for this because she was a part of it. It actually took 7 years to kind of get together. And she said, I don't want it to be a biopic. I don't want it to be a timepiece. And I want there to be a bit of humor in it. So it's not so heavy. Like I want there to be some levity.
Hmm.
And her team and Diablo Cody in particular just nailed it. And I thought it was incredibly well done. The acting, the singing was, how do you mean? Alanis is not an easy person to do karaoke to, or be on Broadway and singing her songs. And I think, the proof is in all the Tonys it was nominated for in that year. So
That's amazing. And I know you said that her team has copies of the book.
yeah.
If Alanis was to read this from cover to cover, like what is the most important thing you want her to take away from this book?
Oh, that's such a lovely question. I would say how much she has made an impact on people. I think, we brought that up earlier. I think obviously me personally, I wrote this very much in tribute to her. But I think, I pull in a lot of comments from other people, from other artists, and I would hope that she can still stand really strong and proud behind this album, knowing how much it really was so effective. And I can't imagine living in a world where Jagged Little Pill didn't exist.
And I just, for people who are not in this industry, I just want them to know, like, how long have you actually worked on this book? Because I'm sure, like, people, and again, as you know, I don't know how much shower curtain salesmen work, you know what I mean? But like, I know how much it takes to put just a show together or to get ready to do a radio break, and I'm sure for you to write your articles. So to put this book together, like, how long did this take you to do?
Yeah, I want to say from start to finish, it was probably like a 9 month period. But there was a good chunk of like literally all last summer. I didn't have a life. I was in the world of Jagged Little Pill and I was fine with that. But I didn't want to I didn't take on other real big assignments at that time. I wanted to really focus because I wanted to be consumed by it all. So yeah, it was quite a long process. But only befitting for such an important album.
And I know the book's been out for a little bit at this point, but like, how did it feel to get this out into the world and to know that a project so important to you is now like taking on a life of its own?
Yeah, my degree is in fiction writing, and I still haven't written a fiction someday. I've been a music journalist for close to 20 years now, and I never really thought I could write a book. It's a labor of love. It's very hard to keep the focus and keep the pages focused for your audience. And so I was really proud of myself. I have written a few other books before this, but I think this is the one most close to my heart. I started my career writing about women in music. My very first story was about Adele before anybody really knew who she was yet in the States. And it's been very important to me to give the space to women creators who often haven't had the same opportunities as, men musicians. And no disrespect, because I love a ton of male artists too. But having this be my first book about a woman and having it be Alanis, it's just meant the world to me.
Selena, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate having you on the show.
Thank you so much for your time.
That is Selena Fragassi, again, music journalist with the Chicago Sun-Times and Spin. And don't forget to check out her new book, Alanis, 30 Years of Jagged Little Pill. Make sure you follow her on all of her social media to grab more information about the book at Selena Fragassi.
Hey, it's Kelly Alexander, and thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Kelly Alexander Show, so you are the first in line for all the cool content coming your way.